here, and today oh my gosh, can I film one video without me dropping books? Today I wanted to do my September wrap up. These are the books that I read in September. I wasn't even going to do this video because I don't have a crazy amount of books that I read, but we have to talk about Hannibal. This is the first book that I read this month. It is Thomas Harris's Hannibal. Wow, okay, a lot to talk about here. So the reason I picked this up was because I had recently read American Psycho, and I was like, I really gotta read another really good serial killer book. I was like, I'll read it because I had read Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon already. So I was like, oh, we'll just finish the series and we'll read some great Hannibal Lecter content. So this is the one where Hannibal goes, he's already escaped, so it's after Silence of the Lambs, and he goes to Rome, and he's like chilling in Rome for a while, and then Mason, who owns a pig farm, is trying to find Hannibal Lecter because Hannibal Lecter made Mason cut his face off and feed it to dogs when he was younger, and so he wants to seek revenge by getting Hannibal Lecter, bringing him to his farm, and having pigs devour him. That is the whole basis of the story. I'm sure you guys have seen the Hannibal movie, if not read the book, but they are vastly different, and we need to talk about it. We need to talk about the ending. I will give spoilers, but I promise I will let you know before so you guys can like turn the volume down for a few seconds, but let's just get into it. Okay, we follow the detective with Hannibal in Rome, but the thing is like there's probably 100 pages where we follow this detective through Rome, and Clarice isn't in it at all, and Hannibal is like barely in it. So I was already a little disappointed going into reading this book because I really wanted to just have some like good Hannibal Lecter, you know, stories, and he was kind of missing from a good portion of it. This does happen obviously in the film as well, where we're following the detective along, but a lot of the time he's following, you know, Hannibal. So we still do get him, I feel like, more in the movie than we do in the book. That being said, it has been a while since I've watched the movies. Then we get to see where Hannibal is staying. So he leaves Rome and he comes back to the States. We know this. This happens in the movie as well. But the difference is that in the book, we see him flying over. We see him renting a house. We see him going shopping. And it's weird because in the movies, Hannibal is this like larger than life, just like madman. And he's almost this enigma. He disappears, he pops back up every now and then, but we don't really know what he's doing between all that time. This book made him much more of a human being. It made him much more tangible, it made him less terrifying. We also get a backstory, so if you guys have watched Hannibal Rising, which is the prequel, Hannibal Rising is like about his childhood and how he lost his sister and how he grew up during the war, and basically it's supposed to, I don't know, give you a reason for why Hannibal does what he does. But the point is that he's a madman, and we don't know, right? And like that's what makes him so intriguing in the movies, in Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon, and Hannibal the movie, just not the book, is that we don't know these things. And so I personally, it gave us a backstory that I didn't want. I don't want him being turned into a person. I don't want him crying over his sister. Like that's not the Hannibal that I know. This one is the most different that's from the films. So Silence of the Lambs, pretty much the same novel as the movie. So perfectly written, fantastic. Highly recommend if you guys haven't checked it out yet. Red Dragon is pretty close to the movies. There are a bit of differences here and there, and then also we get a bit more on Francis Dollarhide's upbringing. And in that sense, I really enjoyed it because he's not this larger than life person. He's just this like mentally unstable man. But Hannibal is so different from the film. Clarice risks a lot more in the book than I think she would be willing to risk in the movies. And there is a time that some things happen and she kind of almost like turns her back on the FBI in a way. And that's not the Clarice Starling that I know, you know what I mean? I mean, she's in love with her career and she loves it because it connects her with her father, who was a police officer who she lost when she was younger. And I felt like her motives were just strange, and I was very confused by Clarice throughout this entire book. Now, a good part of this book was Mason. So Mason, like I said, is the person who owns the pig farm. You get to learn so much more about Mason, and I kind of got a bit of that like just insane madman through him and less through Hannibal. Like, he almost overshadowed Hannibal in this book for me. We hear things that he has done to his sister, things that he does to children. He literally drinks cocktails of children's tears, which is just so disturbing. We get a lot of his sister mixed in there too, which I can't even remember if she's in the film, but even if she is, she doesn't play a role like she does in the book. Pretty much everything about that is different other than the fact that he still wants to feed Hannibal to his pigs. Jack Crawford, Ardelia Mapp, and Barney are all in the movie. So Jack Crawford is, Starling's like his protege in Silence of the Lambs. Ardelia Mapp is like her friend in the FBI who she ends up moving in with as her roommate. And then Barney is actually the guard who was like kind of on good terms with Hannibal in the first Silence of the Lambs. So they all make a return, and I gotta tell you, I was so disappointed by some of the, I don't want to give anything away, but the way some of these characters were treated just really bothered me. So basically, the part of Italy is a lot similar. Even there are some differences, but it's a lot more similar to the movie than any other part of the book is. Everything else is kind of very different. So now I'm going to ruin the end of Hannibal. So I'm going to put a little thing up here, a spoiler alert, if you will. And when this is up, just turn down the volume for a few seconds because I'm just going to say something really quick, and then you guys can come back. So go ahead, turn off the volume if you don't want the ending ruined. Okay, I gave you a chance. Are you here for the ending? You guys are totally okay with me ruining the ending, okay? So this is what happens at the end of Hannibal the book. Clarice and Hannibal run away together and fall in love. What? I was so confused by this. Am I the only one who didn't know that this happened in the book? Let me know. This just ruined everything for me. And I wonder if I would have felt differently about it had I read the books before seeing the movies. Needless to say, I did not enjoy this book as much as the other ones. It was still well written, I still love the series, and I still enjoy the writer and everything like that. I still love Silence of the Lambs, I think it's one of the best horror books, but did not enjoy the ending of this one. So that is Hannibal, guys. Have you guys read this, and did you feel the same way about it that I did? Next up, I read Timequake, Kurt Vonnegut's. So this one is about, because I'm too stupid to explain it to you, so I have to read it from here. On February 13th, 2001, according to Vonnegut, the universe will tire momentarily of expanding. Maybe it will be more fun to shrink for a change and have a reunion of all the fun stuff back where it began. Then it could make the great big bang again. It will shrink to February 17th, 1991, but will then decide that expansion is the way to go after all. So that's the basis of Timequake. There's a Timequake where the universe stops expanding and begins to shrink. Which is odd, too, because this is actually talked about in the Hannibal book, and I read these right after another, and I was like, what are the odds? In that book, it talked about, Hannibal was talking about, like, I think it was like Stephen Hawking's theory that eventually the universe will stop expanding and begin to shrink again, and then he said, like, well, if that happens, then maybe I can see my sister again, something like that. But then Stephen Hawking, I guess, ended up saying, like, oh, I did some miscalculations, that's not gonna happen. Something like that. But it was just weird that I read these right after each other. That always happens where I read a book and it has like a phrase or some weird thing linking them, and I'm like, what are the odds that I read these two books together? Okay, I'm getting off track. So that is what Timequake is about. So the universe is expanding. It's like, hey, no, we're gonna shrink for a while, and then it's like, oh no, we're gonna expand again. So there's like a 10-year, like a decade there, where you have to go through the same thing that you did when the universe was shrinking again. Okay, does that make sense? Nobody has free will. You have to do the same actions that you did do. So if your action led to the harm of someone else, you still have to do it. Every word that you uttered in that decade, you have to do it. And then in the book, free will kicks in again, and you kind of see how that affects other people. Very interesting story. However, I will say, if you're like, oh, that sounds like a fun story, it's not really about that. The Timequake happens, but all of Kurt Vonnegut's writing, it's more like little anecdotes of fiction and nonfiction stories that kind of take place around the Timequake. And so although the Timequake is mentioned in the book, it's not the entire narrative. Yeah, Kurt Vonnegut's writing is so strange, and I feel so bad because every time I talk about his work on my videos, I'm just like, it's so weird, you should read it. And I don't feel like I justify it, but it's very strange. It kind of like throws you off kilter. He has this alter ego named Kilgore Trout that he talks about, and so he talks about his life and Kilgore Trout's life like he's a real person, but then he mixes fiction with reality. It's so odd and bizarre. Still very fun, but very Kurt Vonnegut. I don't know. I'm gonna leave the TED Talk of Kurt Vonnegut down below, not of him, but of people describing his work, because I think that it just explains his work a little bit better. I mean, I highly recommend all of his work. Slaughterhouse-Five is, I think, one of the best books ever written. But if you're very much so into literature and you love things that are just like off or weird or strange or just out of the ordinary, then I highly recommend picking up, honestly, any Kurt Vonnegut book ever. He is becoming one of my favorite authors very rapidly. And next up, I read Paul Tremblay's The Cabin at the End of the World. People break into, there's a married couple and then a child. People break into their house and tell them that they must sacrifice one of their own, you know, like, and if they don't, the world will end. The people have to make a decision based on kind of just that. And so the whole time you don't really know what's going on necessarily, nor do you ever really get answers. I mean, I think that there is enough in here that supports your claims no matter what you think is going on. I think it's open for interpretation is what I'm trying to say. I really enjoyed this book a lot. It's written in first person, but through this first person narrative, you get these like, oh, I looked at him and in that moment I thought of this time. And then so in these kind of like flashbacks, but they're not flashbacks because they're still taking place in present time, you get to know more about the characters. You get that character development. And I've never read a book, I don't think, that was quite written like this. And so just the writing style of this, I really, really enjoyed. Paul Tremblay has a lot of really great one-liners in his work. There are a lot of scenes where I was like, oh, it surprised me, it shocked me. It's at times very gory, it's at times very sad. It's kind of got a bit of everything in it. I will say that it's not my favorite Paul Tremblay book. I still like A Head Full of Ghosts, and I honestly, if you guys have not read A Head Full of Ghosts, please pick it up because I love that book. But that one too doesn't really give you all the answers, I don't think either. And although these are the only two books that I read, I do wonder if Paul Tremblay has that kind of theme throughout all of his works of leaving it up for the reader's interpretation, which I love and I'm a huge fan of, but some people don't, and I think that's why some people didn't enjoy this book, was because they want to be told, no, this is exactly what's going to happen. But what's the fun in that? I think that he's a fantastic writer, so I think that you'll enjoy this book even if it's just for the writing in it. I don't always agree with the characters' actions. They don't do anything that's outwardly stupid. You know, sometimes you're watching movies and you're like, why would you do that? It's not like that at all, but some of the things I'm like, well, why wouldn't they just do this or do that? But at the same time, I'm not in that situation. I don't even know what I would do. I would probably just cry the whole time. I think it's easier, you know, to, in retrospect, think about what somebody could have done differently versus like being in the moment. But even still, I don't think that they made any crazy stupid decisions. I think they were in a really difficult, tight place. It was a fun story. It kept me on the edge of my seat. I was entertained by it. It wasn't scary though, I will say. If you want scary, Head Full of Ghosts really freaked me out. This one was just more fun. That is my review on that. But I also read this, The Sandman by Lars Kepler, but this one I'm going to talk about in another video because this was from the dollar store. So I don't want to talk about that one yet. And I wasn't even going to do a video because some of the things that I read are for other things, but I had to talk about Hannibal with you guys. Let me know what you guys read this month, or I guess last month, and I will see you tomorrow with another horror video. Bye guys!